Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the L. Ron Hubbard Theater in Hollywood, California. Tonight we present a live broadcast of the Golden Age Radio Hour featuring L. Ron Hubbard's romantic adventure story, Stowaway Deluxe. Bands were blaring, confetti showed like snow gone crazy, horns honked and whistles blew, dead broke, half-starved. Jerry Forsyth jauntily swung his cane and smiled wistfully. The Brittany was about to sail with its cargo of fur and top hats and laughter and champagne, bound out for France from New York. From the ship came the aroma of food and hemp rope and salt water, all tangled but distinct. It was almost too much for a man who had not eaten for 2 days. Jerry Forsyth started to walk away. He remembered then that he had no place to go. His room in the swanky 400 hotel was locked for non-payment, and in it were his clothes, his studs, and all his papers, except the ever-present passport he carried. Jerry Forsyth looked back at the tall black ship, which sparkled with noise and shining brass. He swung the cane 3 times around. His decision was made. He went toward the gangway. Striding light-heartedly, looking like a smartly dressed member of a famous family, the purser at the gangway stopped him.
Ticket, sir?
Jerry Forsyth had a smile for that, and he swung the cane and gave his derby a deft tap on the crown.
Tickets? Oh, you thought I was a passenger. Well, quite a logical mistake, as I've traveled this line so much. No, I'm not going with you this time. I just came to see off the prince.
The prince?
Well, that is. Please don't mention it again. He's trying to escape the papers this time. Poor devil's hounded to death, you know.
Oh, certainly. Yes, he must be. No doubt some steward can tell you where to find him. Go right on up, sir.
Jerry Forsyth smiled again, and then swung his cane on his way to the deck. A steward touched his forehead.
Baggage, sir.
Oh, I came on this morning. We're about ready to shove off, aren't we?
Righto, sir. About half a shake, sir. Can you find your way to your cabin?
Oh, righto.
And Jerry walked along the deck. He paused for a moment at the rail and waved generally at the crowd and bellowed,
"See you in France, Tommy."
And then he went down a passageway on A deck and through the great soft-carpeted salon. A steward was passing with a tray of sandwiches. Jerry gave his cane a mandatory twitch. He took 2 sandwiches from the tray and munched them critically. The steward looked respectfully at him.
They're quite all right. Please take some down to suite A15.
And Jerry went down another passageway. He came to a door which stood open, disclosing a beautiful cabin and a half a dozen people, some of them ladies in silk. Obviously, this was a goodbye party for the pale young fellow who sat on the bed with a handful of champagne. Jerry thrust his head and his smile through the door.
I say, pardon me, but could any of you tell me where I could find the prince?
6 faces turned to the newcomer. The ladies looked surprised and interested.
No, I'm afraid you have the wrong cabin.
Well, damn it all anyway. Can it be that he isn't sailing with me after all?
I'm sure I don't know. You say you're sailing.
Yes, of course. But the prince promised me that he'd be on board. Devil take it. This is going to be a terribly dull trip, I must say.
The ladies gave a pale youngster a meaningful glance. Instantly, he stammered,
But why? Why can't you come in for a moment? If this prince isn't on board, I'm sure you must feel badly about it.
Jerry looked up and down the passageway, undecided and hesitating.
Oh, do come in. I'm sure Georgie would be glad to know someone aboard. He gets so seasick, you know.
Oh, that's rotten. I have some remedies, however, and I'd be only too glad to help the poor chap along.
Oh, how kind. Oh, I'm Anne Winston. Mr.
The Earl of Forsyth, Miss Winston. I'm charmed.
Introductions were accompanied by a flutter of eyelids and nervous hands. Jerry saw nothing of it. He poured himself a drink of champagne and munched delicately on a sandwich.
Your first crossing, Earl? Or is it Your Majesty?
Oh, rather not. How otherwise could I have gotten across, you know?
Everyone thought that a capital joke, and while laughter still went the rounds, A young lady came down the passageway and unlocked the cabin directly across. Jerry just sat and blinked. The young lady was of medium height, very slim, except where slimness was unnecessary, and she had hair the color of burnished mahogany. She had full, slightly parted lips, which made Jerry shut his own tightly. She disappeared into her cabin. And Jerry noted the number on the door.
Oh, I think I'll have a very jolly trip now that I know George here. Won't we, George?
George beamed, flattered merely to be in the presence of a man of the world. Whistles roared hoarsely. Whistles piped. The Brittany was about to get underway. And Winston stayed until the gangway was almost in, and then, with a winning smile, shook hands with Jerry again and fled. The Brittany's engines began to pulse, and the segment of the wharf visible through the port began to retreat. Jerry smiled at Georgie. The smile widened into a laugh of pure, exuberant joy.
What's wrong?
Oh, well, I was just thinking how capital this all is. You know, old chappie, I've given them the slip again.
Given who the slip?
Jerry leaned confidently closer and whispered.
The newspapermen, of course.
The newspapermen? I don't understand.
Why, I'm the prince.
Not bad, thought Jerry to himself, and it was not bad at all for a young man who had beat his way from San Francisco to New York to seek and lose his fortune in the big town. He took a turn about the deck and saw the Statue of Liberty slide past on their port. He gave the oversized lady a salute and then went back to Georgie. But even the slight swell of the channel, coupled with Georgie's own fear of seasickness, had proven too much. Georgie had changed from pale white to light green.
I say, don't take it so hard, old chap. Champagne does it.
So Jerry forced 3 glasses of champagne rapidly down Georgie's throat. Georgie's moans during the next 2 hours gradually faded into snores. Jerry woke him up and gave him 3 more glasses of champagne. The snores deepened. Jerry thereupon looked through Georgie's steamer trunk and uncovered a tuxedo which bore a Fifth Avenue label. Georgie was almost of a size with him, although Jerry was broader through the shoulders. Much broader. Jerry dressed carefully, listening to the rise and fall of the dinner chimes. The porthole had grown very dark as they slid out to sea. Georgie's wallet lay upon the bed, but Jerry disdained to touch it. The tuxedo was quite enough for the moment. He went to the dining salon, stepping lightly to the beat of an orchestra which gradually grew louder. The salon was not half full, a fact which encouraged Jerry. There would be many empty cabins, but there were still enough people to make the presence of one more unnoticeable. A steward came sliding up and began to lead the way toward a table.
You have an assignment, sir?
He began to thumb through his passenger list. Jerry smiled and looked quickly about. He stood up straighter and waved at an imaginary person. In reality, he had seen the girl with the auburn hair. She was seated on the captain's right, resplendent in a glittery gown which had no back to speak of and even less front.
Oh, I say, I just remembered. The skipper asked me over to his table. Bother the reservation, old man.
The steward bowed and led the way to the captain's table, where there was one empty seat. Jerry drew it back and sat down. The captain was a little surprised.
How are you? Been a long time since we met, hasn't it? I say, that was certainly a fine crossing we had.
The captain's surprise deepened into a frown of struggle. He tried desperately to place this handsome young fellow.
I spoke to, I say, what's his name? The president. I meet so many people at my townhouse.
You mean old Hansen? President of the line?
I can't really remember. Remember I said I'd mention you to him? That's been quite so while ago, hasn't it? Yes, those were the days. Let's see, you were on the...
The Queen of England.
Quite right. Why, I place it all now. This deuced memory of mine.
Jerry glanced up at the salon wall. Kind fortune had caused the master mariner's and chief engineer's papers to be posted right there behind the glass instead of in the bar as usual. He saw the captain's typewritten name on the license.
But I never forget a friend. I said to myself when I booked my passage, why? This is a streak of luck. Here I look forward to a dull passage, and lo, I see Captain Bronson, the master of the Brittany now. Must have done some good, my speaking to old Hansen. I see you've come up in the world. The Queen wasn't a bad ship, though, was it?
Oh, yes, indeed. Certainly glad to have you here at the table and with me on the cruise, too, by God. But your name?
Don't speak it, please. Well, there's been too much publicity for that, and I'm heartily sick of it. I can tell you, reporters have no respect whatever. I'm calling myself Jerry Forsyth for the moment for convenience.
Yes, of course. Well, I shan't give out your real name. I know about these things.
But I haven't had the pleasure of meeting your other guest here tonight. I came aboard rather late, you see.
Oh, my dear, this is Jerry Forsyth. And this is Miss Lawrence, Dorothy Lawrence. You've heard of her father, of course.
Of course. How are you, Miss Lawrence? Your dad certainly trusts his fellow men to allow you to come alone on this trip, doesn't he?
Very gallant, my dear Mr. Forsyth.
Captain Bronson indicated the lower end of the table. Jerry turned to face two men and two women. The women he passed up at a glance, but the men were interesting.
Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Coulter.
Jerry bowed slightly to each, taking in their faces and their hands at a glance. O'Neill was lean with a narrow face topped by a black fedora. Coulter looked pompous and unsavory. Jerry saw their two seats and their two sets of hands, the slim, nimble, flexible hands of gamblers.
Very pleased to know you, gentlemen.
At Jerry's careful manipulation, the conversation turned to Bronson's exploits, and Bronson talked of himself for the remainder of the meal in a loud, chuckling voice. When the coffee had arrived, Bronson was quite convinced that Jerry was the most interesting man he had ever met, and was quite confounded that he had ever forgotten him. But then a captain on a crack liner meets so many people. Jerry's questions, put with the deftness of a swordsman's foil, showed Bronson that here was a man of breeding, appreciation, and seaman-like intelligence.
Oh, so few people appreciate what a captain is up against. And Hansen, well, what could you expect from a landlubber anyway? Even if he was president of a big shipping company.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They've got machinery crates for sculls and they're stuffed with lading bills. But seamanship? Never.
Right. Why, one time I was...
O'Neill and Coulter listened, their fingers restless. They were not watching the captain or Jerry. They were staring at the throat of Dorothy Lawrence. On that throat, as soft and white as the delicate skin itself, lay a string of beautiful matched pearls, which would have brought a price anywhere from $100,000 up. Lawrence, the perfume king, thought them little enough for his daughter. Miss Lawrence listened attentively throughout dinner, laughing at the jokes and banter, but watching Jerry as only a woman can watch. At the close of dinner, the captain begged Jerry to visit him on the bridge and went away. The others drifted off, leaving, seemingly quite by accident, Dorothy Lawrence and Jerry Forsyth together, wrapped in an evening cloak with a fur collar. Dorothy Lawrence led the way to the deck. Forsyth steered her forward to the rail, and they stood together listening to the song of the sea along the hull and watching stars burst out upon the world.
Why do New York so much harm?
Why, what?
In leaving it, of course. I can't believe that their hardship has become my good luck. I thought this would be such a dull trip, and here I find you. It's almost too much to bear.
Dorothy Lawrence laughed about that, wanting very much to believe it.
But I knew you were coming. From your father.
You mean you saw Dad?
Oh, no, of course not. He merely called me up and mentioned it casually. Said I might take care of you on the way.
He knows so many people. I wonder why you didn't come up to the house.
Oh, I assure you I would have, had I known, but I thought my cause lost before it had begun.
Why, now I'm almost glad Aunt Sarah is ill.
That's too bad. Is she so very sick?
Yes, the dear soul. And all alone in Paris, too. She didn't say quite what the matter was, but she wanted me to come to her.
A quiet shadow detached itself from the angle in the bulkhead and drifted slowly away. Jerry recognized the retreating back of the lean O'Neill. He had heard that conversation. An hour drifted by, and then another. There was dancing, but Dorothy Lawrence was tired after a day of embarkation. Jerry escorted her to her room and kissed her hand at the door. She shivered a little, and then she went in. Jerry smiled at her without a word and went toward the bar. The bar was filled with gliding cigar smoke, a rumble of men's voices, and a clink of glasses. Jerry paused at the bulletin board and read that the ship's pool was now open for a midnight reading. He knew about a pool. There were 10 numbers, and a passenger could lay $1 on any one of them. At midnight, the ship would have sailed a number of sea miles amounting to 3 figures. The last of the 3 would be posted. The winner take all. There were already a score of names on the typewritten sheet, but the number 5 had been avoided. Jerry promptly called for a steward.
See here, old man. I'd like to get in on this.
$1, sir.
Jerry reached confidently into his tuxedo breast pocket and started to drag forth an imaginary wallet. Suddenly, he looked at the men around him in the room and gave the steward a worried frown, bending toward the steward's ear.
I say, I don't like this.
What, sir?
These card shops. I wonder why you allow them aboard. I've got a thick wallet here. I don't like... Can you change a $100 bill?
The steward blinked and shook his head, unable to keep up with all of this.
Then put my name down. Jones is the name. Here. I'll sign it, chit for it.
He pulled a pencil and paper out of the steward's pocket and quickly wrote the IOU.
There you are, old man. When the purser's office is open in the morning, there'll be a handsome tip for you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
And the steward quickly wrote Jones after the number 5. Jerry wandered up to the bridge and found Captain Bronson. Oh, the captain smiled his welcome and began once more to hold forth on the ways of running a steamship company. Jerry kept him at it until 11 o'clock, and then, with a sleepy good night, left Bronson and strolled aft. He found the patent log without much difficulty. Now, that's something like a ship's odometer, dragging in the water behind the ship. The line and the spinner trailed out into the pearly blur of the dark wake. The log purred as it turned, registering the sea miles traveled with a slow white needle. The dial was divided into 10 places. Jerry took the back off the instrument and, working very quickly, disengaged the mechanism from the spinning line. He replaced the back and removed the face and set the needle to the number 5. Then, with the log apparently untouched, Jerry faded back into the darkness and waited for the steward to come up for his reading. A flashlight circled down the deck. The steward bent over the instrument. The steward scratched his head for a moment, then shrugged and jotted down his figure and went away. Jerry reconnected the log, and it gaily began to click off sea miles once more. That done, Jerry sauntered back to the bar and stood beside the board. The steward came back after a bit and posted the mileage figure ending in 5.
Oh, so you're the winner, Mr. Jones. I sure am glad I posted you. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been anybody on 5, and it's terrible hard to give guys money back to them.
Well, well, that's quite a surprise, isn't it?
He accepted the $20 and his IOU and paid the steward a $1 tip and went smiling to the bar. O'Neill was there, spinning a drink between his tapering fingers.
Say, you certainly lucky, huh? Hey, Colton, look at this guy. Wins a single on the pool.
Coulter came over very, very, very casually.
Oh, $20? But it's fun anyway. Why don't they run these pools at $100 a number? That would make it interesting.
O'Neill looked at Coulter and gave him a wink.
How about some cards? Play bridge?
Oh, yes, but not tonight. I've had a hard day of getting my affairs in order to leave. I might add that I seldom play for less than 10 cents a point.
O'Neill's wink fluttered into a blink.
Oh, that is, neither do we. Do we, Colton?
Until tomorrow, then.
Jerry wandered away to Georgie's cabin where he could replace the tuxedo and sleep until 6 at least without making Georgie suspicious at all. The next morning, very early while Georgie still slept, Jerry arose and donned a gray tweed suit from the steamer trunk. He went for a stroll about the decks after deciding that a sharkskin might be better choice. He nodded pleasantly to the officers, where he met them, pausing to say a few words here and there to passengers, generally leaving a wake of good nature behind him. He started down a passageway before he realized that he was headed wrong. But he was already in sight of the purser's window, and the purser was looking blankly at him. Jerry smiled and walked easily forward.
I say, this certainly is fine, this brisk air.
I thought you weren't coming.
Oh, that's funny. Were you taken in by that, too?
By what?
That's priceless. I've crossed this way before, but I never really gave them the slip this well.
Gave who the slip?
Why, the newspapers, of course.
The purser began to remember the conversation on the gangway, and then she too laughed.
Oh. Oh my gosh. So you're him, eh? Oh. Well, that's a good one on me.
They didn't even suspect I was the prince. Yes. And who else is aboard? I may have some friends there after all.
Oh, well, here's the passenger list.
Jerry walked in through the door and leaned against the purser's desk, looking down at the sheet over the purser's shoulder. The purser ran her finger down part of the list, showing proudly that many well-known people were aboard besides the prince. Next to Jerry, there were many hooks in orderly rows on the wall, and from the hooks dangled keys, which clinked to the roll of the ship. They clinked a little louder for a moment.
Yes, dear old Mrs. Schwartz. She wanted me to marry her niece, I think it was.
Oh, is that so?
Well, I think I'd better be getting going. I certainly enjoy this brisk air. You've got a fine ship here, purser, but I'm at a loss to see why they waste a woman like you on the ocean when...
The purser began to beam.
I'll speak to old Hanson about it when I see him next time.
Hanson? You know the president of the line? Well, think of that. My name's Johnson. R.C. Johnson. Prince?
No, don't say it. With old Mrs. Schwartz aboard, I wouldn't have a moment's peace if she knew. I must keep undercover. Don't give out any information. Yes, I'll tell Hanson about you. Johnson, courtesy in a ship's officer should never be overlooked by company. Those people are sure.
Oh, yes. They never understand. If there's anything I can do for you, don't fail to ask me. Your cabin all right?
Splendid. Just splendid. Well, I'll be seeing you about. You must come down and have a snort or two with me before the trip's over.
Oh, well, I'll do that. You bet I will.
Jerry took a purloined keys from his pocket and read the suite numbers upon them. He chose one on a deck that was a deck and the width of the ship away from George Winston. He entered and saw the place was of the best. He promptly rang for the steward, and the steward came.
It's you. I thought this cabin was...
Oh, you're the one who forgot to deliver the tray to my suite.
But I did. There was nobody in there.
Bah! You're a muddle-headed fool, Stewart. You must have forgotten the number.
It was A15.
For God's sake, I ought to report you to the chief steward for that. I set a tray for 15, and there you kept my party waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Never mind.
Tendering a $5 bill.
I've shifted my room. I can't stand the noise and stink over there in the upper deck. And another thing, they forgot to take my trunks to my room. They put them all in the hold.
Oh, but...
They did, and I'm not going to have it. You go right down and get 2 stout lads to bring my trunks up here immediately. I don't care if you have to unload the whole ship either. The name is George Winston. Attend to it immediately.
The steward left, and so did Jerry. Jerry went back to Georgie Winston's room and knocked lightly. He went in to find a very green Georgie sitting on the bunk holding his head. Jerry rang for champagne.
That's the stuff to fix it.
And very soon, Georgie was prostrate again, though wide awake and far from drunk.
I was going to put on a shark skin, but Anne packed and she must have... Why, that's a shark skin you're wearing, Prince. It looks like mine.
Jerry raised his brows politely and then grinned.
So you patronize the elite tailors too? Do you?
Why, yes. How did you know?
Jerry tapped the label, but not so that Georgie would notice.
And they told me this was an exclusive model. $200 they charged me.
They told me it was too.
Well, I guess we were both double-crossed.
They only charged me $125.
The penalty of being the prince, my boy.
Georgie, soothed by the thought that he too owned a suit good enough for a prince, lay back and allowed himself to swallow another tumbler of champagne, and he went back to sleep after that. Jerry went to lunch and found Dorothy Lawrence radiant and Captain Bronson puzzled.
I can't understand it. We're 15 knots behind ourselves by the log.
Is that so?
With a guilty thought of the midnight past.
It's very puzzling, I must say. And the log is all right, too. I had it inspected. I'll have to check it with a shot this afternoon. Hard to reckon longitude.
Isn't it? But come to think of it, I had a case like that aboard the Skipjack. That's my yacht. She's a diesel 175-footer. It was south of Bermuda a couple years ago. We discovered a new current when we checked it.
Oh, is that so?
I wouldn't wonder, but what the Gulf Stream is increasing in speed and coming farther north.
Miss Lawrence, please, pardon me. I'm going right up and report that current to the hydrographic office. Oh, it's very important. Means all sorts of chart changes. Pardon me.
Jerry watched him lumber away with a grin. The shot would prove the theory of a strong current, showing that the Brittany had gone 15 knots further than was registered on her log, therefore demonstrating that sinister forces were at work upon the sea.
You seem to know everything.
Jerry passed it off with a wave of his hand.
Dabblings. That's all just dabblings.
After lunch, he and Dorothy went for a promenade. Walking very close together, Jerry could feel the smooth ripple of her body against his side. He began to see a thing that he had never seen before. In her eyes, he was a hero. But if she found out, he really ought to make himself worthy of her. He should have to gather quite considerable money together, and then... Dorothy left him for an afternoon nap, and O'Neill and Coulter immediately pounced upon him and led him off to the bar and a bridge game. The game was, of course, a very one-sided affair, and the score sheet began to look like O'Neill and Coulter had just inherited the national debt. Jerry knew that he played with card sharpers, but he had his reasons. Once or twice, Jerry disappeared from the game and gathered a drink at the bar. The second time, he also gathered a new deck of cards, and in the cover of the washroom, stacked them neatly. It was Jerry's deal. They had used the ship's cards by general consent, and the pasteboards were clean and bright. Jerry was very clumsy. He didn't, he said, have much practice with cards. He played bridge, he said, with some of his family, but not very often. He stopped midway and puffed on a cigarette, and somehow the roll of the ship and the puff of smoke took the score pad away. That score pad was valuable. Two heads dived for it. Jerry walked and went into the deal. They were presently bidding his stacked hand. Coulter and O'Neill were far too intent upon their own trickery to notice another's. They saw their chance, and they bid it up to a grand slam, doubled and redoubled, and started into play and make a killing. But the stacked deck was against them. O'Neill fumed as a dummy. Suddenly, O'Neill saw the last of the Coulter's hand. O'Neill grabbed Jerry's arm. O'Neill's eyes glittered like a pair of dirty black diamonds.
So you think you can pull that and...
Jerry grinned and threw down his cards.
Gentlemen, You've pulled this twice, as raw this afternoon, but I did this for the sport of it. It's fun to see a sharper take two sharpers for a ride.
Coulter got the point and began to smile. O'Neill's glee was expressed in a tense voice.
He is next to the dam.
Sure I am.
They all sighed in relief at that, and they bent their heads together.
Now listen. She's got a fortune in pearls around her neck. I've got $5,000 in cash. The $5,000 is yours if...
"30 hours later, Captain Bronson entertained his table, especially Jerry, by alternately chuckling at and cursing the stupid hydrographic office, which would not admit to any such current. He showed them a radio message which told the captain to study his dead reckoning, and Jerry joined Bronson in berating the lack of intelligence in that office. But after a bit, this lost its interest through repetition, and the conversation lagged.
I say, Captain, have you ever had any stowaways aboard this ship?
Stowaways? Stowaways? Oh, not on the Brittany. Men know better than to get aboard this ship while Carl Bronson is in command.
Is that so?
Oh, you bet it's so. Just one got aboard here. We found him in a lifeboat. By God, I fixed him. First, I threw him into irons, and then I decided that was too damn good for him. So, I yanked him out and made him scrub every plank on this ship. And then, I made him coil hawser for 24 hours without a break. Oh, that's a pretty tough assignment for any man. And when the trip was over, I sent him back to his original port in irons. He's still in jail.
Oh,
But what if some very likable young fellow...
Oh, it doesn't make any difference to me who he is. A stowaway is a stowaway, and that's that. Oh, it's a personal insult to the captain, and especially to me. Just show me one, and I'll half kill him.
But maybe the poor fellow...
Show me one, and I'll half kill him. Maybe more.
Jerry had a flat taste in his mouth after that. But when they rose from the table and when he caught O'Neill's signal, he forgot all about it in the face of the business at hand. Jerry and Dorothy went out on the deck and strolled for a while, admiring the sliver of a moon and the wind and the stars and talking about things people talk about when they walk on decks at night.
Oh, my old fever is getting the better of me, Dorothy. I think I'd better go to my cabin. I got a touch of Java, and it's never left me.
You poor boy. You won't do any such thing. You come right on up to my suite and I'll fix you a nice drink. Or have it fixed for you.
Jerry pressed close against her as though for support and allowed himself to be led to her cabin, a very wan expression on his face. She deposited him in a chair and then hurried about, picking things up and dropping them and adding those womanish touches to the room and to Jerry. At last, she had his slim, tuxedoed body draped with a blanket, and she said she had a warm drink in his hand. Not until then did she, sit down on the couch across from him. She was very graceful and beautiful. He held his glass to hide his face and felt a twinge of guilt. Oh, she was so lovely in that evening dress which matched her pearls, that glowed against her smooth throat, and her slim, slippered feet were stretched toward him with just a suggestion of tautness.
You know, Dorothy, if I thought I had a chance,
Yes?
I'd ask you to marry me.
Jerry sat back sadly, but he wasn't acting now.
I'm not what you think I am. I'm a lot of things I shouldn't be. I'm low on cash.
Her eyes were bright with sympathy. Her lips were slightly apart. A knock on the door saved him. Impatiently, Dorothy let the caller in and stood staring blankly at him and the radio message he tendered. Even Jerry was hard put to recognize O'Neill.
I thought I'd bring this to you personally, ma'am. Sparks said it was important.
She read the message. She gasped and moved weakly toward Jerry. gave him the message, and Jerry read the message.
Dorothy Lawrence, SS Brittany at sea. Suddenly worse, must have specialist from Germany. Am out of funds, require 30,000 immediately. Sarah.
But she can't be out of money. And why didn't she wire Dad?
Jerry touched her shoulder consolingly.
You can't say much in a radio. Perhaps she's been robbed or something of the sort. And you certainly don't have 30,000 cash with you.
And I couldn't send it if I did have it.
Yes, you could, ma'am. We'll send the money for you, ma'am, via radio.
Oh, the poor dear's alone and broke. I can't wait until we land tomorrow. I must send it now. But how can I? Is my credit good with the company?
Unfortunately, ma'am.
Say, you got your pearls. They're good security.
Of course, of course.
Dorothy stripped them off and handed them to the purser.
But I must have a receipt.
He gave it to her and took her message, and she thanked him so graciously, Jerry felt a rapier of remorse lance through him. The assistant purser, or rather, O'Neill, went out.
You will be attended to immediately, ma'am. The pearls will be in the ship's safe.
Listen, I'm going to make certain he takes them. I'll be back in a little while. Wait here.
He caught up with O'Neill in the passageway and gripped his arm.
Don't carry these things loose, you fool. Do you want us all to get in trouble? Here, quick, God knows whether or not she'll go to the purser to make sure.
I thought...
Never mind what you thought.
Jerry pulled forth a flat cigarette box bearing the name of an English firm. It was unsealed and the stamp was intact. Jerry slid the pearls into the box, affixed the seal, and handed O'Neill what appeared to be an untouched package of cigarettes. O'Neill smiled at that.
Hell, they'll never suspect it.
They're waiting. Let's go.
He led the way down to his own room, and there he found Coulter sitting tensely on the edge of the bed.
Did you get him?
Sure. It was a snap. She'll never know the difference until we're miles away.
Coulter insisted upon seeing the pearls, and Jerry produced another seal so that the one now affixed could be broken.
But this is the only other seal I've got. I spent 2 hours steaming them off, and they're the last of this kind of cigarette in the bar.
Yeah, good work.
O'Neill gloated over the pearls. Coulter had to handle them to make sure that they were real. Not until they were all satisfied did Jerry restore them to the cigarette package. He glued on the second seal. O'Neill held the package in his hand.
You smart kid. Here's 1,000.
Fi-
It's cheap at the price.
5,000? At any minute, somebody may get wise and come down here. I found out from the captain that the ship's detective is going around as a steward. As the steward who takes care of my room.
Jeez.
O'Neill gave Jerry the up and down and then peeled off another stack of bills.
4,000 there, and you've got the 5th. That's it, kid. I guess you earned it. These pearls are worth 100 grand split up.
Jerry leaned against the wall. His shoulder blade caressed the bell. Presently, a loud knock came from the door.
Jeez.
In a sudden panic, the box rattled in his hand. Jerry jumped forward. He took the package and popped it into one side of the wall cabinet. The steward came in.
Did you ring, sir?
Certainly not, my man.
The bell has not been working well lately.
But he wondered about it and looked searchingly into the faces of the 4 men there. When the men had gone, Jerry whipped open the cabinet, jerked out a package, and shoved it into O'Neill's hands. An instant later, Jerry had torn the bottom out of a life jacket.
I fixed this up. I told the captain you wanted to take the preserver ashore to remember the ship by. He's a fool. He believed me and said you could. Now stuff that in here quick.
O'Neill was still shaking and expecting the steward to come back with the officers at any moment. He shoved the cigarette package into the life preserver safe jacket. Jerry's fingers flew. Presently, the life preserver looked intact and quite innocent.
Now take it and beat it. Wear it under your trench coat, Coulter. And remember this, that guy is suspicious. You'll never know when he's around. Watch yourself. I don't want to get my neck in this.
Yeah, thank God we land tomorrow. I won't sleep all night. I'll see you don't get wise.
They filed out, thanking Jerry for his kindness and his services. He waved them all aside and shut and locked the door. He stood laughing silently for many minutes. Then he went up to the double-doored cabinet, opened up the right side, and took out a package which rattled. He opened this, and there were the pearls.
Wait until they find out they've been guarding cigarettes.
If it hadn't been so hard after all to prepare that ruse. All English cigarette packages looked alike. How could they tell that he had switched on them? With the pearls in his pocket and a smile on his face, and with $5,000 in bills making his jacket sag, he went back to the suite of Dorothy Lawrence. She had changed into something more comfortable during his absence. One of her filmy silk stockings lay in a shimmering pile beside the bed. He pulled out her pearls.
Here they are. There's been an attempt to steal them from you, but I managed to avert it. Put them where they'll be safe. Don't say anything about this to anyone. I certainly don't want to be called a hero in the newspapers. It wasn't much of a fight, and they won't be back. The radiogram was fake, and the assistant purser was fake.
She took the pearls and finally understood his story. She laid the gleaming string to one side, carelessly putting them out of her thoughts. He kissed her then, or rather, she kissed him.
My reward?
No.
They docked at 3 the next afternoon, and almost the minute the gangway creaked, the two sharpers went over the side, walking alertly, trying to be nonchalant. They explained the preserver to the customs, and the customs let them through. The two jumped into a taxi and were rapidly whisked away toward the nearest dealer in stolen gems, about to be very embarrassed by tendering a package of cigarettes for sale. Jerry found Dorothy packing her last bag. She had already packed, he had already packed and had sent George Winston's slightly used trunks down for inspection. He looked very natty in his own suit, swinging his cane with his derby cocked at a satisfied, rakish angle.
Oh, there you are. When we get to Paris, I'm going to call Dad to put you in charge of his Paris branch immediately. And he will, too. So poof! For your lack of money, dear. We'll be married, and then you'll be close to me, making a lot of money.
He'll give me a job.
Certainly.
At a desk.
Of course.
I'll see you in Paris, my dear. I've some business in town, you know?
I'll be waiting for you.
He went away then, swinging his cane. He told the purser goodbye and shook hands with the captain, and then drifted down the gangway with the passengers. He strode along the dock, picking his way through the joyful crowd, swinging his cane and humming a little to himself. He did not know what his destination would be. He did not care. He had $5,000 to spend. He looked back at the ship once more and then went on with a wistful smile.
If only she hadn't mentioned a job.